Sorry to interrupt. We're going to start now. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. In a couple of seconds. Yeah. Um,
All right, Bharat, this is Nayan from the tech team. You're on the screen, so we can get started.
okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bharat Gopalaswamy. I'm a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. I'm very pleased to welcome you all on this Saturday afternoon to this wonderful, inspiring, but yet um, a very emotional event, for lack of better phraseology or words. Um, Today, on behalf of Lead America in partnership with Greatly and Psephology, um, we welcome you to the event titled Indigenous Civilizations, Perception Wars, and Hope Beyond Genocides. I have 5 wonderful speakers. They all have great stories to share. The stories are emotional and they're true. Um, so thank you for joining us. It'll be a pleasure to listen to them. They're going to share their stories first, and please do not hesitate to ping us with your questions and comments and any clarifications that you have. Without further ado, I'm going to first invite my first speaker, Mr. Mirza Ismail, who is a native-born Yazidi who was forced to flee Iraq by Saddam Hussein's regime in 1991. Mirza has dedicated his life to the service of victims of genocide and slavery perpetrated by ISIS and its allies in Sinjar, Iraq. He's the founder of the Yazidi Human Rights Organization. Mirza, the floor is yours. We welcome you to share your thoughts and views.
Bharat, this is Nayan again. I think we are facing some connection issues with Mirza, so don't just go to your second speaker, please.
Okay. Then in the order which it is, I will be pleased to welcome Mr. Dawood Saleh, who is the author of Walking Alone and a Yazidi genocide survivor. He's currently serving as an ambassador for Global Peace Chain. He has worked closely with the Yazidi genocide survivors, documenting stories of women and children who suffered rape and torture under ISIS. Dawood, this floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bharat, and thank you for giving me the chance to participate with these incredible people that I see here. As a Yazidi genocide survivor, I always want to share the story about the current genocide that I personally, a survivor of that genocide that occurred in 2014 by ISIS. As many of you know, and others, they are not aware that Yazidi faced one of the most horrific and genocide that happened in the 21st century in Sinjar when ISIS attacked my city. I lived there with my family, and we all had to flee out of the city when ISIS came, but not all of the people had a chance. Over 5,000 people were killed in the first days, and over 700 women and children were captured by ISIS and used them as sex slaves. We still have like 3,000 of them are missing, and despite of all the time calling the international community and our awareness in order to do something to bring back our women and children, but we have still more than 3,000 of them in ISIS captivity. Right now, the majority of my community, the Yazidi, they are living in IDP camps, in the refugee camps, and they cannot go back to their homeland, which is like 80% or more is totally destroyed. And still there is a big conflict in Sinjar, the area where the majority of the Yazidi used to live, and including my family who is living now in IDP camps and who cannot return back to Sinjar because of the a huge conflict between the different groups, different militias, and also the Iraqi government is not completely ruling the area yet. So there is a big dangers on my community, the Yazidi community, and it's like an ongoing genocide that's happening. And every day I hear different stories of like trauma, of PTSD, of suicide from my community that's happening in the IDP camps. Especially they don't have any like basic services in these IDP camps, and the majority, like over 100,000 of the Yazidis, they immigrated to different countries, especially Europe and Germany in specific. And I'm of the one of the people who left his family behind, trying to be a voice for my people and trying to increase awareness about what's happening to my people. And from this event, and with every event that we get a chance to participate, we call the international community and everybody who is not aware to be voice for the Yezidis and try to help this community, this very ancient community that is like has a history of like more than 6,000 years. They are the original people of the Mesopotamia, and they have a long history with the Babylon, Assyrian, and it's about to get extinct in the Middle East after so many genocide that started from the fall of the Babylon Empire until today. So yes, these have faced over 74 genocides throughout the history, starting from the fall of the Babylon Empire. And this genocides is not just the genocides that happened by the tourists, but actually it happened by the different groups, different countries, different armies, and even yes, they are the original people of the Iraq. They have faced different genocides, but by the Iraq itself, and some of the genocide that the Yezidis have faced throughout the history, they were from the mayor of the Mosul, which is one of the city that the majority of the Yazidi live right now. So Yazidis are facing an ongoing genocide, and thank you for giving me the chance to be the voice in this event.
Thank you, Dawood. That was a good opening opening set of comments, and we welcome it. And I'm more than what I love as a moderator is that you just stuck to your guns and you just stuck to your time. So I congratulate you for that. But I'm sure you have a lot more to say, and you have a lot more to share, and you have a lot more that you can empathize, that we can empathize with you. And we'd welcome you to talk about it more in the question and answer session or the round of questions. I have been told that Mirza's technical difficulties have been resolved. So I would like to invite him back onto the stage. Mirza, welcome. I'm glad that your technical difficulties are resolved. For the sake of completion, I'd like to reintroduce Mirza, who was a native-born Yazidi who was also forced to flee Iraq by Saddam Hussein's regime in 1991. Mirza has dedicated his life to the service of the victims of genocide and slavery perpetrated by the ISIS and its allies in Sinjar, Iraq. He's the founder of the Yazidi Human Rights Organization. Mirza, good afternoon. Welcome again, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Good evening to you all. Namaste. Thank you so much for giving me time. And you have introduced me. So my name is Mirza Ismail. I'm from Catania village, from Sinjar. I fled Iraq in 1991. I was a UN refugee for over 2 years in Syria and Turkey. And in 1993, I came to Canada. Since 1999, I have been trying to head the YSD, as my colleague says, Dawood, the YSD have faced over 74 genocide in the past, and this one by ISIS still continues. And unfortunately, international community has almost done nothing or just a little for the last 6 years so that the Yazidi can go back to their native land and live in peace and freedom. The Yazidi originally is from what we call the birthplace of civilization, which is the Sumeria. The birthplace of many other world's religions, such as the Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And the Yazidi, Kildо-Syrian, Mandian, and also there were like Hindu people at that time, all used to live in that area. At that time, we didn't have any of the new or Abrahamic religion. So all people or all groups used to live in coexistence, which was the best. And unfortunately, now many of the religions is like they are the religion of peace, but the problem is being happened mostly by their missionaries. And most of the genocide against the Yazidi people are taking place by the local, which are the Muslim people, and mostly because of our faith, as the Yazidi faith is based on nature, like it's very similar to Hindu. The four main natural elements: the sun, the air, the water, and the earth. So if any of those natural elements is missing, the life would not exist. So we believe these are the most important in life to keep life goes on. Sometimes it's hard to where to begin. When the genocide began in early August of 2014, like I spent most of my time after coming to Canada, and I spent most of my time in Iraq, and mostly I was in Baghdad, kind of just working with the government, trying to get implement the Article 125 of the Iraqi Constitution, would give us the rights of a separate administration unit for a region of the majority of the regions from one group. And unfortunately, the Yazidi and Kildо-Syrian both failed to convince the international community to implement that article. If that article had happened or implemented by the Iraqi government, probably we would not face the ISIS genocide. In the constitution of Iraq, it says like everybody are equal, and everybody has equal rights and freedom. We have responsibility, but we don't have any freedom in Iraq. Since 2003, or the fall of the Saddam's regime, both government, the KRG and the central government, have been fighting for our land, which is called disputed area. We don't know why. When in 2003, when Paul Bremer, the U.S. Military man, created the Iraqi constitution, they put that area from Sinjar to Kirkuk as a dispute area. So both governments are fighting for our land while we are still alive. So both governments are trying to get us out to take over the land. The Nineveh Plain and Sinjar is very rich in oil, and that's one of the reasons they want to kick us out or exterminate us. And at the same time, they want to convert us. They give us only two choices: to convert or die. They don't give us the third choice like they give to Christian and Jews, which says like the people of the book and people without book. So we are considered infidel in their eyes. The majority of the genocides against the Yazidi people came under the name of the Turks, but the work was done by the Kurds. If now you go to the area, to the Yazidi area of eastern Turkey, in northern Iraq, in northeastern Syria, and in eastern Iran, all those areas are for, there are some Iranian, some Turk, and some Arabs, but over 90% of our region is occupied by the Kurds today. And the Kurds are the one who betrayed us on twice. One in 2007 was same thing in August when four trucks full of explosion exploded in Catania and Al Jazeera village that killed over 500 people and over 1,700 were injured. And that time, again, Sarbas, the chief militia of KRG, had a meeting with those radical group and withdraw all its forces until the attack took place. And in 2014, in August, I have evidence that the KRG chief militia Sarbas Babiri had 3 meetings with ISIS leader, one in Sinjar Cement Company and 2 in Baj. Attacked by a month to 40 days. By force, they tried to collect the Yazidi weapon, and Yazidi and Christian, the KRG will protect the religious minority, and the Iraqi government failed to control the border, and now the KRG is controlling, and Sinjar and Nineveh Plain as a part of KRG. That's what the KRG declared this. And when the attack happened, until like 10 a.m., I'm from Catania, and until 10 a.m. I was in contact with my family. Some of them were abducted, some of them were killed. The KRG militia did not allow them to run for their lives to nearby mountain. So until 10 p.m., they were blocked from fleeing to mountain. And then when they had chance to flee, the ISIS was already there. And in September, I was in Canada, and just I went back to northern Iraq, trying to search for my family. So I met many of those escaped Yazidi girls, including Ashwaq and many others in this IDP camps. And everybody says that the Peshmerga did not allow them to flee, and the men didn't have enough weapon and ammunition to fight back against ISIS. So how could a group defend themselves with no means of defense, like when you don't have a weapon, when you don't have ammunition? So there's no way people can, the Yazidi could defend themselves at the time. So according to many people on the ground, the UN estimated the number of dead at 5,000, but many Yazidi believe much more than that were killed. And also I met with some of the escaped Yazidi girls. I cannot mention their names because their life would be at risk. From the ISIS record, they were with the ISIS Amir. From their record, 7,450 Yazidi were kidnapped by ISIS, mostly young women and children, while they killed the majority of the men. And this genocide is still ongoing. And as many of you might be aware, and I'm sure my colleague Dawood is aware of the latest development about the Yazidi girl Hala, who was liberated by the Iraqi forces KRG coalition in Hawija in 2017 in October. And she was not able to get home. Before she gets home, the Kharji imprisoned her in Erbil, like Basima Darwish and like many others. So whoever of those girls say anything that's there was like a connection with the Kharji and collaboration with the Kharji and ISIS, many of those women were imprisoned by Kharji until they brainwashed them, and then after some of them may never come home, some of them may already have been passed away, we don't know. But when Basima was there, Basima was beaten, and Basima was accused of, she was the reason of 3 Peshmerga that were killed, but according to Basima at that time, there was fighting between the militia themselves. They fight together and some got killed, and when Basima said like there were no ISIS ran away and she was still tied in that cult. So when she said that the Peshmerga killed one another, they were kind of trying to loot things.
Ismail, you have 1 minute,
Yeah.
2 minutes more. Okay, maximum.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And that's what happened. So now through this panel and through our whoever watches us, we are hoping that the international community and UN come to a point to accept the truth. When they accept the truth, they have faced genocide and they should follow their moral obligation. They should do something. And the area should not be called a disputed area, or the area should not be victimized between the Kharji and central government. We are asking international community for international peacekeeping, and also we are asking for the autonomous region for the Yezidi and Assyrian, so that they can protect themselves in any future attack. And once again, thank you so much, and my special thanks to Hindu community, whom from the first day have been with us and supporting us and standing up with us, and as well as the Jewish community. Also, and my special thanks to CYCI and Eagle Watch for supporting us to liberate many Yazidi girls and children from the hands of ISIS. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ismail. Thank you. That was passionate. I know you have a lot more stories to tell than you've currently shared, and we'll come back to you to listen to some of your emotional stories. And, thank you for making that plea. I know it is very difficult, but we are very pleased to play whatever role that we can play in, being your voice and ears for some of these painful stories. I understand it's I congratulate you for being able to share them. The next speaker is Joe Overton, who is a member of the Sikangu Lakota Rosebud Sioux. She's a longtime tribal activist and advocate. She is currently working intertribally to combat COVID in the Indian country. Ms. Overton, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here among people that have survived so much and are so passionate about saving their people. I first want to acknowledge that I am Sikangu Lakota, which is Rosebud Sioux. That's in South Dakota. The federal name is Rosebud Sioux. And I live in Utah now, and I'd like to acknowledge that the land that I currently am on originally and still belongs to the Ute people, the Paiute people, the Shoshone-Bannock people, the Navajo people, and the Goshute. These lands belong to them, and it was being used by all 5 tribes when when the Western colonizers came. The Native American Holocaust or genocide is also called the 500-year war because it's ongoing. It began with Columbus landing in Hispaniola. Within about 100 years, those people were wiped out and did no longer exist there. The genocide continues on till today. It looks a little bit different than it did then, but it still continues. The weapons that have been used, and some are still being used, and what killed the Native Americans in such mass numbers are weapons. They forced people off their lands and into other places, slavery, rape, so many different things that have killed the Native Americans. The guess is that in all of the Americas, so that would be South America, Central America, and North America, that when the European colonizers arrived, there were 600 million people occupying those lands. In a very short amount of time, 58 million of them were dead. 90% of the people who lived on these lands were killed. They would have survived and continued to grow if they hadn't been the continual victims of that genocide. And as we've seen, so with the other speakers, they speak about, oh, they wanted something on our land. They wanted our land. They wanted to convert us to a religion. Columbus told his men to shout at the people in whatever language it was that they spoke, Italian or Spanish. They would yell at them, convert or die. Well, the native people didn't know what they were talking about, didn't agree, so they were killed because they didn't speak a language, didn't even have a chance to do anything about it. So when the colonizers arrived on the East Coast, and I'm talking about the British ones, we know some of the stuff that happened with like the Pilgrims who arrived and things like that. And they did bring disease like smallpox that the Native Americans had no immunity to. And so it killed them in great numbers. And then we had the British who came and they wanted to part with Britain itself. They actually recruited the Native Americans to fight in their war and help them win against the British. The peace treaty, Paris Peace Treaty, was signed in 1793, I think. And it was signed between the American colonists and the British. And it gave all the land west of the Appalachians to the colonists. The Native Americans were neither informed, not invited, did not sign the treaty. And so they began the push westward. And as that happened, the Native Americans pushed back violently. Their women were being stolen, their children. There were massacres that happened, like the one that's called Wounded Knee, where they came in and they killed all the old. That's all that was left, the old, the women, and the children. And they were slaughtered, almost every single one. And it's just a ridiculous way to justify what they did. We have heard about the buffalo, right? That especially like the Lakota used all across the land, millions and millions of them. And they say that the white man hunted them to extinction. Actually, it was a government push. And they said, if we kill the buffalo, the people will die. So it was another weapon of genocide, which is why there were heaps and heaps of dead bodies of buffalo that weren't eaten or used. It was just a way to kill the Native Americans in a different way. There's the one where the American government sent blankets for the winter. They were infected with smallpox, another weapon of genocide against the Native peoples here in the United States. So in about 1853, I think, it was the Fort Laramie Treaty that was signed. Our people call it sign or die, because at that point we were dying in big numbers. And the American government said, if you put down your guns, we will take care of you. As long as the grass grows, as long as the river flows, we will give you food, we will give you shelter, we will educate you, we will give you medical care. And that looked like shabby blankets that had holes in them. My grandmother tells a story of a moldy, maggoty piece of beef that was shoved off a buckboard. Eat this. And that, it just has continued on. The education that was provided were boarding schools where the children were forced to go. And if their parents didn't make them go, the parents went to jail. My own mother was forced on a bus and sent away from her family, denied her language, had her hair cut. It was just awful. They had bounty hunters that would just gather up the children in trucks and take them off to boarding school. The travesty of boarding school continues to echo throughout Indian country. The children were so traumatized that they grew up to be adults that no longer had a connection with their real traditions, and it just has caused so many problems in terms of drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and an inability to have a real education. So you don't have as many that could graduate from college. My mother went to law school, became a judge, was the attorney general of the Rosebud tribe. And all 4 of her daughters, me and my 3 sisters, all went to college, all received degrees. And now our family is filled with nurses and social workers and lawyers who continue to change. We are strong, we are resilient, and we rise. But lest you think that the American genocide has been discontinued, the Fort Laramie Treaty continues to be in use. And one of the things that it granted us was the Black Hills. The American government has $1.3 billion in a bank account to pay us for our land. And we say, give us back our land. Would you sell your mother? Would you sell your grandmother? No, we will not. We want our land back. And we continue to battle that with the American government to have the Black Hills, our sacred land, given back to us. The Native women are, 4 out of 5 Native women are subject to abuse by not Native men, by men that are not Native. However, on the reservation, there are very few laws regulating the non-Natives versus the Natives. And so these men often go after they've killed these women. These women are kidnapped, put into trafficking, and it continues to be a problem. If you look up missing and murdered Indigenous women, is a huge movement that we're all working at to save our women right now. The prisons are filled with Native Americans. No ethnicity matches how many Native Americans are in prison. No ethnicity matches how many children are in foster care. They steal our children. They say, we don't want them to be Indian. We want them to learn how to be good people, more white. As a foster parent, I heard a caseworker say, oh, the last thing we want is for these Native children to go back to the reservations and their families. It continues this push against us. They steal our children, our traditions. We were told that if we continued to do our sacred dances and traditions, that we would be killed. So we did them in secret. And there were many that were killed. So we bought our traditions and our language with our blood. Our people died to keep those for him, and they are sacred to us. We hold our elders sacred. We hold our children sacred. They are both our past and our future. And right now, more Native people are killed at the hands of police than any other ethnicity. You don't read about that, though. We're not included on any of the charts. They don't mention it. It's as if it doesn't happen. And now with COVID, one of the things that has happened is the inequalities of the last 150 years. The land we live on that is far away from anything, that is unarable, that you can't farm, the medical care that is given to us by the federal government with that treaty, substandard, so substandard. And so the rates that the Native Americans die with diseases is horrific. TB is endemic across most reservations. I know people that have died from tuberculosis. Don't believe, not for a moment, when America says, oh, we've got the best health care. Oh yeah, for those who can pay. For us, they have nothing, and we die. We die in the hospitals, we die in the prisons, we have died in the wars. 25%, a full 25% of all Native Americans have served in the military. We served when we weren't even citizens. of the United States. And yet this is what we get in return from the federal government as we lay our lives down for the country that we love, not the government, the country that we love. And now with COVID, when it hit Navajo in March, the numbers for the population, the death and the infection rates outstripped New Jersey and New York. Very few people heard of that. There's 1/3 of the people don't have running water or electricity. So COVID became a tremendous killer. We've got about 10 times on or off the reservation, if you're native, 10 times more you're going to be infected and 4 times more that you are going to die from it. So we need to be careful, and there's very little going on to bring that up. The people on the reservations that belong to those tribes, they're the ones. They're the ones feeding the elders. They're the ones that are bringing supplies in. They're the ones that are doing funding. We work to save the people. We work so the people may live. It is our prayer that we do that. And so what do I call the COVID death rate, the prison rates, the poverty? It is institutional genocide. And we continue to die, and we continue to fight against it. And we are the invisible. We are the uncounted. We are the other. They buried us, but they didn't know we are seeds and we grow. We are rising, and we will not continue. And we continue our battle against the federal government to receive the care that they promised. And I am so grateful. Namaste. I am so grateful to be able to tell this story of my people in my own small way. And I am honored to be with all of you, and honored to be not federal, but we are all together. We are a community, both of those who have been subjected to horrible things, and yet we rise. And I am so honored to be with those who continue to rise and fight for the lives of their people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Overton. That is a passionate plea. I have an immediate question from one of the viewers. Who wants to confirm that did Ms. Overton say Native Americans served in the U.S. military even without being citizens? Can you clarify that, please? Yeah.
My own grandfather served in World War I, which happened in the early 1900s, and we did not receive citizenship until about 1926. And we did not receive religious freedom until 1978.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought about, I think so far what I've learned, and my assumption and guess about what we are going to learn more is there is a common thread of suffering with all of you. And there is also a common thread of resiliency with all of you. While we romanticize the idea in hindsight about resiliency, in real time, developing that resiliency is not romantic at all. The sufferings that you all face is just horrible in real time, for lack of a better word. And I cannot find a better word for it, but it's horrible in real time. That applies to all of you. And I think while you're writing the stories of your grandfather's suffering and grandmother's suffering, it would be far beyond imagination for us to even think about what that suffering in real time would have been. And they will have not even known that they've been abused or suffered until you really look back at it and say, is this the life that we all lived? Is this the life my ancestors lived? So it is difficult. I completely empathize. I will never say that I understand because I've never been through any of your sufferings. But I think, I'm so glad that you're all speaking this out. And I think the more you speak, the more we can find ways to cope with this. Thank you again for bringing the story, and well said, well told. Thank you. My next speaker is Phil Thompson, whose areas of practice are in governmental, Native American, administrative, civil rights, and employment law. He served as the president of the Loudoun County, Virginia branch of the NAACP, and as a member of the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP Executive Committee. Phil, I welcome you to the stage.
I want to thank you for having me, and you know, some of the things that I'm hearing, unfortunately, is as a former Marine, I saw some of the things that where some of you have coming from, and understand what that means. I also represent Native American tribes, and so I understand what our last speaker was saying. And you know, I just want to be sure that people understand that when you walk around and drive around the United States and you see names like Chesapeake, Missouri, Illinois, know that those people that those names came from, or who gave those names to the Europeans, are all dead. You know, in a lot of ways, a lot of those tribes are gone; they're extinct. I represented the Chiricahua Apache tribe. Everyone knows the story of Nelson Mandela and his 27 years of internment in South Africa. Their entire tribe was locked up for 27 years and lost over half their members, and only survived through resilience and their spirit. So what we did to the Native Americans is it resounds today, and it's tremendous. I fight it every day up in federal court. You go into federal court and you walk into the court, and everyone in there is being paid by the federal government, from the judge to the jury, if you get one, to the clerk, to the U.S. attorney, the security guard. You walk into the United States court, and you're the only person in there representing the Native American tribe who's not being paid by the federal government, and they call that justice. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. You know, I'm an African American, and a lot of you are recent immigrants to this country. But there's one thing you all know: when you get here and you're here for a while, the first thing you want to say is, "I'm glad I'm not black," because you see what happens, and you see how we're treated, and you see the way we live. A lot of us are survivors of the transatlantic slave trade. For about 315 years, 20,000 ships brought Africans to the Americas. They estimate that 12.5 million were transported from Africa. About 1 million died what they call the Middle Passage. And when you died in the Middle Passage, you were tossed overboard. Many were on ships where they were laying on top of each other, essentially. And so you got human excrement, all that happening, although they wanted to protect the cargo because you were valuable cargo. Now, I say this because I ask if you get a chance to do research on runaway slaves and see how much at that time they were offering for runaway slaves. We were valuable cargo. The whole economy of the South, southern part of this country, and much of the North was dependent upon this free labor. And so, you know, when we say genocide with African Americans, we didn't have they were not trying to, quote unquote, kill us without a benefit. We were slaves. We were enslaved people. We were not slaves. We were enslaved people who were being used for labor. And we built the U.S. Capitol. You go down and look at that Capitol. We built that. We built the White House. We built a lot of the structures in Washington, D.C. and other cities. The University of Virginia, we built the original buildings were built by slaves. This was free labor, which everybody benefited from. But after this country went through a tumultuous war to, quote unquote, free the slaves, we went through a period what's called Reconstruction, where African Americans were given a certain amount of rights and were able to do things. So we were able to elect people to Congress, we were able to elect people to Senate, we were able to get businesses, all these various things. But at some point, the federal government pulled out of the South. And when they pulled back out of the South, the people in the South reinstituted what was called Jim Crow. And Jim Crow was basically laws that said that we couldn't drink from the same water fountains, we couldn't eat the same food, we couldn't vote, we couldn't do anything. And at this point, in order to, this state-sponsored terrorism was followed up by a terrorism that was even worse, where vigilantes and white people would kill African Americans at the slightest drop of a hat. A lot of you, if you ever get a chance to go down to Montgomery, Alabama, to the National Lynching Museum. It's the Museum of Peace and Equity, but we call it the Lynching Museum. You will see this is a monument to the over 5,000 plus individuals that were lynched, extrajudicial killing. I live in Loudoun County. We had 3 lynchings occur here in Loudoun County. As a matter of fact, today I was at a site where they were building a reflecting area for people that passed by this site, where a young 15-year-old was drug out of a building, drug out of the jail, and lynched for the conspicuous crime of scaring a white woman. Black men, black women could be lynched for the slightest offense to white people at that point. Even as we move forward to today and we say, oh, well, you know, you have rights to vote, you have rights to do all these various things. We all know what happened. We saw what happened with George Floyd. It's still going. Our genocide is not as pronounced as what some of you have come from, you know, where it's been direct killing to wipe you off the planet, or your people off the planet, take your land. But we've all gone through similar events. In the United States in 1925, African Americans owned 950,000 farms. Through terrorism, illegal means, legal means, whatever, there are now African Americans in this country only own 50,000 farms. We lost 900,000 farms. And if you know one thing about this country, you know property is king. 900,000 farms through a systematic process. So as we look at our time here in the United States and who we are, as African Americans, we have been subjected to some of the worst conditions in the world, but we've survived. A lot of us have prospered. A lot of us have moved on. And it's a testament to human fortitude. It's a testament to a lot of what your parents and grandparents put into you, but we still are very cautious. When I moved to Loudoun County, Virginia, I had people, my parent, my mom, other folks that were concerned about me moving to Loudoun County because they were scared the Klan was out here, or that the white people would not take too kindly to me moving to Loudoun County. When I became the president of NAACP, even my best friends, some of us who all served in the military, who faced down ISIS, Taliban, Iraqi forces, were still saying, hey man, you better watch out. You better watch out what you say. You better be careful. Watch your back. You know, be careful, because they know that this is the type of environment that we live in, that people do not want to see us as African Americans successful in this country. And we've talked about this, and I've had discussion with my wife and others about the zero-sum mentality that we have in this country, where people say that, you know, if minorities benefit, we lose. But that's not the case of America. That's not what this country was built on. This country was built on people coming from all over the world to come here and prosper. And many of you are firm examples of this. And your friends are firm examples that you've come from other parts of the world. You've assimilated into this society. You've gotten jobs, and you've been able to do very well. It's still a hindrance for us as African Americans. A lot of immigrants get passes that we don't get. A lot of immigrants, especially Muslim immigrants that I know are, you know, have some African background. The first thing they say, I'm not African American, I'm Muslim. I'm not a Muslim, I'm not African, I'm not Black, I'm Muslim. Because they know, even as bad as at times we treat Muslims in this country, they don't want to be identified as an African American because they know the impact. So, you know, in closing, I can't say that we have, some of you have had recent horrendous situations that you've escaped from, and that you have family and people still living in those environments where, you know, death is stalking them at all times. And I understand, like I said, I've been there and I've seen it. And unfortunately, our country in some ways caused these problems for you, or didn't, you know, with a byproduct of not finishing the job or whatever we did or did not do. And it's out there all over the world, and it's been that way for many years. But, you know, you're here in this country now, and understand that you have assumed rights and things that a lot of us African Americans and Native Americans who were here from the very beginning have not been able to successfully obtain. And so understanding that, so when you see on TV, you know, you know, they always point out the worst in us. You'll see the crime, and you'll see this, you'll see that, and you'll see the president and other people. Oh, you know, they're out of control. They're this, they're that, they're this, they're that. People are not acting that way because it's some kind of a genetic defect. They're acting that way because this is how the society, this is what the society has done to them and put them in, a lot of them in a position where they feel like there's no hope. When you take a person's hope, when all of you came here, when you got to the United States of America, you knew there was you had a chance. You knew you had a chance. You knew you had a chance at freedom. You knew you had a chance to walk down the street and not get killed. You knew you had a chance to get away from genocide. You knew you had an economic chance. You had a chance to get education. All of these things that you, as new arrivals in the United States, have been able to get, that chance is always not there for African Americans and Native Americans in this country. Understand that. Understand that some of the rights that you just assumed the day you got off the airplane or however you got here are not universal. And even where they are universal, there's been a mindset when you beat a people down and take their spirit, it is hard for them to understand how to move forward and how to become better and how to take advantage of a lot of things that are out here to take advantage. Myself, my wife, we were able to take advantage. Between us, we have 5 degrees. We both served in the military. We both work good jobs. We work in the community hard. But a lot of people cannot see how to get there and don't know how to get there. And you know, I work with Native American tribes, and I see they got tribal land that they could do some things with, but because of their history of being totally depressed and stomped on, it's hard for them to see how to get there. So, you know, have empathy for the people around you, understand their issues, but also as recent arrivals in this country, reach back and help where you can. Reach back and help, because that help will come back to you. As bad as Native Americans and African Americans have been treated in this country, you do not see us doing wanton violent acts against white people in this country. Despite the fact that we probably got all the justification in the world to do these things, we don't do it. We treat them with respect. We live with them. We go about doing things with them, and we try to live. And that's how we are. And hopefully you will see our example and learn and try to help everyone around you, so that everyone around you can learn what's going on in your part of the world and try to help to fix that too.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Strong words, passionately. I have an immediate question for you. If you could keep that very short so that I can go off to the next panelist. But it's from one of your fellow panelists who would like to pose the question. If you could speak to the continued voter suppression.
You know, the Republican Party knows that if they can keep a certain amount of African Americans and other groups that generally highly support the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party from voting, it helps their chance of election. So what we're going to see is we're going to see all kind of efforts to try to keep the African American vote down, the Native American vote, and even, you know, in some ways, the Asian vote, the Hispanic vote, try to keep it down so that helps the Republican Party. But a lot of us are out here working as hard as we can. If and when, and I don't know how many of you are naturalized US citizens, that vote has been paid for by people who died trying to vote. So you must exercise that right to vote when and if you have it. It is that important. Whether you're voting for Republicans, Democrats, whomever, you have to exercise that right to vote. I don't have the other shirt that I have on that says, you know, vote paid for by your ancestors. And that's true. People died to vote. So please get out and vote.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to my next panelist, Ms. Swapna Raina. She's a member of the displaced Kashmiri Hindu community. She is a victim of violence and forced migration. She will be able to closely relate to the community's pains and continues to be an activist with the hope that justice is served. I'd also like to point out that we're in the month of August, just on August 5th, almost a year ago, historic history was changed in Kashmir. And I'm sure you're going to allude to that in your remarks as well. So I welcome Ms. Raina to the stage. The floor is yours, Ms. Raina. Welcome.
Namaste, everyone, and good afternoon. I'm deeply honored by the opportunity to be on the speaker panel today. Special thanks to Lead America for giving all the indigenous civilizations and people a platform where we can narrate our histories and tell our stories, untold stories, painful stories of our genocide and our exoduses. Myself, I'm a proud Kashmiri Pandit. Pandit in our language means a scholar, and I practice Hindu religion, hence pretty much in my, today I'll be referring to myself and my community as Kashmiri Hindus. It is indeed a privilege to have an opportunity to speak on the topic today and listen to my fellow co-panelists. Overwhelming, very emotional, but there was a lot of common thread there, some things that resonate with all of us, brings back a lot of painful memories, but feels that yes, how we survive this is the resilience that Joe mentioned, that being our strong force and our driving factors here. I want to say, listening to everybody's story just fills me with more vigor and energy and strength, that I should continue on this struggle, continue my activism till our message is sent across the globe. And our true story, not biased, not false narratives, are known to the world, and they know what happened to us Kashmiri Hindus. Now, before I say something about the perception and the genocide, the topic for today, I think it's extremely important for me to take you back history and tell you a little bit about ourselves, and not one, but 7 exoduses of Kashmiri Pandits. I wanted to stress the fact, like 7 exoduses, but listening to Mirza and Ismail, 74 genocides, I'm like, oh my God, you know, I can't even imagine the pain and the agony and the trauma that they've gone through. All of this started back in the 14th century. I'm from the Valley of Kashmir, it's called Crown of India. Back in 14th century, Shah Mir, the first Sunni Muslim, he invaded Kashmir, and then through violent means started converting Kashmiri Hindus to Islam, destroyed our temples, ruined our heritage and culture, did whatever they could to kind of make us maybe an extinct species on the face of the earth. And that was followed by Temur Lung, who Lung means lame, and that's how he was known as. He, in addition to this continued torture on Kashmiri Hindus, he actually made a law to persecute Kashmiri Hindus. So accolades to whoever or anyone who would do that. What a shame, and really painful. Didn't stop there, it just kept continuing. Sultan Sikandar, he continued the forceful conversion of Hindus to Islam. And as a result, the first Kashmiri exodus happened. The Kashmiri Hindus, to save their lives, to save their culture, their heritage, they started fleeing the valley, and only 11 Kashmiri Hindus stayed in the valley. The second Hindu exodus happened under the Chak dynasty. Chaks, unlike the Sunni Muslims that initially invaded Kashmir, were Shia Muslims, but no different. They continued the torture on Kashmiri Hindus. All pleas to their ears from Kashmiri Hindus fell to deaf ears. And it is said that around 950 Kashmiri Hindus were persecuted every single day. 950, when I heard like thousands of numbers, may not sound like a large number, but when that percentage compared to the overall population of Kashmiri Hindus is massive, and we're talking about 950 per day. There was something called Bhat Mazar, means graveyard of Hindus, where once these Kashmiri Hindus were killed, their bodies were dumped, and men wear a religious thread called Janay. It's all those were collected and burned in a pyre. Again, to save themselves, we fled. Not many Kashmiri Hindus were left in the valley. The third exodus was under the Mughal Empire. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it, and maybe a lot of you are thinking that how many were left in Kashmir, in the valley, to count for the third exodus. But what happened, Akbar the Great, he was known as Akbar the Great because he was very humane, a very liberal emperor. Under his rule, he embraced coexistence of religion. The torture stopped. So Kashmiri Hindus, of course, you want to go back to your ancestors' land, your motherland, and knowing that now they are able to practice their religion freely, started coming back to the valley. Unfortunately, that didn't last long. It was short-lived, and Jahangir Khan, Akbar's son, followed by Aurangzeb, the torture, we're back in that vicious cycle. The torture continued. Kashmiri Hindus were forcibly asked to eat beef, cow meat, and we worship cow. Hopefully a lot of you know that, with the intent to convert them to Islam. So again, yet another exodus, and we started fleeing. Fourth exodus was under Sunni Muslims, the Afghans, but it came to an end when the Sikhs came to the rescue. They finally captured Kashmir and brought a little bit of peace to the valley. This was followed by the fifth, sixth, and the seventh exoduses. As you can see in these exoduses, and I've heard my co-speakers, the common factor between all of this is the intent of converting the valley to a Muslim state, be it by Muslim invaders, be it by being a target of Islamic terrorists, armed and trained by neighboring country Pakistan. That was really the intent. That was the goal. We need to convert everything and make it a Islamic Muslim state. I personally am a survivor of the seventh exodus, which is still ongoing and really has not officially ended. More than 400,000 indigenous Kashmiris fled in 1990s, the valley, leaving behind everything they had, all their belongings, their ancestral land, their culture, that heritage, that's more than 5,000 years old. No one person who was actually there in Kashmir on the 19th January 1990, I can guarantee you, can ever forget that fateful night. What happened, tens and thousands of Kashmiri Muslims poured out into the streets. The mosques start blaring slogans. And as I was here listening to Dawood and Mirza, and I'm like, my God, some of these slogans and they are saying, they were saying, Reliv Saliv Ya Giliv, which translates into Reliv means either you convert into Islam and be one of us. Saliv, either you flee, or Giliv. Giliv means or else we will kill you, you will die. There were slogans like Hum Kya Chahte Nizam-e Mustafa. What do we want? We want the law of Islam. This slogans like Kashmir, Bataurusti, Batnevsan, which translates into we want Kashmir, where there will be Sharia law, there will be Islamic law, but we want it without Kashmiri Hindu men, but we want it with Kashmiri Hindu women. Another reason, in the middle of the night, all Kashmiri Hindus, whoever can, based on what means they had, what avenues they had, they started fleeing the land. There are true stories, people I know personally, where the men literally gave the biggest possible knife to their daughters, just in case if you hear the third door to the house being broken, that means the terrorists are coming here, kill yourself. Don't let, before you get raped, you kill yourself. I know people personally and who are part of this struggle and getting this narrative out. The correct, true narrative is that they were given poison in their hand. Can you imagine a 3-year-old girl with a vial of poison in their hand being told that if anybody comes that you don't know and they try to touch you, just take and just, ingest this, and that is what we went through. Most of our elites, most of the scholars that stood out were selectively targeted and killed. My own grandfather, who was Justice of High Court, and he was shot dead in broad daylight. That is where activism started. He was left in the middle of the road for hours bleeding to death, and nobody was allowed to come and help him. And the tragedy is our own neighbors, they joined all these other people on the streets in, kind of celebrating the murder of my grandfather and saying that we have avenged the death because he was a Kashmiri Hindu. He was in the legal system, he stood up for the law of the land of India, and it actually happened, guys. And then when people come and ask us for proof for atrocities that were committed on our community, it just shocks me, it numbs me, and the false narratives, the biased information out there, which is spread by the Western media, like the Washington Post and the New York Times, who I really feel that they have sold their conscience, and they have so many false narratives. You cut that there's no, like latest Bharatji just alluded a little bit to, like 5th of August was a historical day in the history of India and Kashmir, where Article 370 and 35A was abrogated, which in very simple words, we don't have a lot of time here, but I want to say what it really meant for the general masses and public information is that it integrated the state of Jammu and Kashmir with India, which meant that from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from the northmost point of India to the southmost part of India, the law are the same. There is one flag, one constitution, same laws, rules are, applicable throughout. And a lot of others, but since it's not maybe a topic for another day, but despite all of that, we just celebrated 1-year anniversary. Despite that, when you hear and read about these false narratives, these biased statements where nobody mentions what happened to the Kashmiri Hindus, how we were killed. I want to be the voice of the people who do not get a platform to talk about it. I want to be the voice of the people who are fighting for justice for years and years and years, not only for my grandfather. I want to be the voice of the person of Tiklal Tuplu, a political figure, leading figure. He was the first person who was killed. I want to be voice of Girija Tikku, a teacher who went back to Kashmir after fleeing because she was told it's safe here, you can come back and collect your salary. Of course, money you need to survive, right? So she goes back only to be kidnapped, raped multiple times, and that's not the end of it. Her body was ripped into two, slit into two using a chainsaw. I want to be the voice for B.K. Ganju, an engineer who was shot dead in a barrel of rice where he hid when the terrorists broke down his door and walked in. And he hid there. The terrorists did not find him. So they were going back, and his own neighbors directed the terrorists and showed them where he was hiding. They came back and pumped bullets into the barrel of rice. His own wife was asked to eat that blood-drenched rice of her husband. The horror stories just continue. And what's more horrifying is as if none of this happened. Nobody's acknowledging this genocide. Nobody's acknowledging what happened to our community, and we continue to face this. Latest as June 8th of this year, Ajay Pandita, a Kashmiri Hindu, he was brave enough, and he wanted to go back and say everything is fine here. He was there. He was a sarpanch, like a community leader in his village. He was shot dead. Why was he shot dead? What was his fault and the fault of the rest of the Kashmiri Hindus? Men, women, children, young, old, the belief, their ethnicity, the religion that they followed. Despite going through all that I narrated, this is the tip of the iceberg, just 3 or 4 stories I have told. There are hundreds and hundreds, a lot of them not accounted for, a lot of them not even known because it just happened. Simple reason, social media was not as active as it is now. A lot of stories, they just got lost in this whirlpool. And what pains me is when there is no acknowledgement of this genocide. What pains me when there is this false information saying that India is a Hindu state and they are against Muslims and Muslims are living in fear there. Let me give you a little bit of comparison, even though I have a more recent data, but from really reliable sources that I was able to get some information, statistics to give you a little idea and understanding, because I think that there's a lot of, we have people from, different ethnicities and different backgrounds on the session here today. So for their benefit, Hindus in Pakistan in 1947, when it was formed, was 15%. And confirmed statistics that I could find goes back to 1998. So appalling that after 1998, we don't have any confirmed reliable sources to refer back to, but in 1998, that population dwindled down to 1.6%. And as I read, and I'm told it's less than 0.5% in Pakistan. This is the state of the Kashmiri Hindus. Bangladesh, the Hindus population from 22% in 1951 down to 9.5% is 2011. Afghanistan, Hindus were in 1951, 770,000, down to a mere 7,217. And my friends, 3 more years have passed since. I wonder how many more have lost their lives and no acknowledgement. Now, let me give you a comparison about
So if you could just tidy up in the next
just real quick, the Muslims in India who are ranting and supported by everybody else in the world say, oh my God, the Muslims in India, they were a mere 9% in 1951 and up to 14.2% in 2011 and going up and strong. Again, thank you for the opportunity, but I want to emphasize what Joe said. Despite everything that our community went through, I'm proud to say that we have not picked guns. We are really resilient. We did hold our guns. On the education front, we have been able to retain our identity. And we have to change the perception created by these false and biased narratives. For all indigenous civilizations right here and many more out on the globe, I think we will be able to retain our individuality, our identity, and be able to decolonize and fight this injustices for all of us to join hands and fight together, because old saying 5 fingers are not as strong as a whole fist altogether. So we really need to join hands, and I want to fight this battle, and I'll continue to fight and raise my voice till justice is served for me, my community, and the genocide is acknowledged. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Reiner. Before I move on to the other panelists, while time is with an eye on the clock, we have 15 minutes and I have tons of questions, but I'm going to find a commonality between all these questions. But I want to pose an immediate question to you, which I've gotten from somebody from Jason in Houston. That's how he identifies himself. But I'm going to reframe the question that he's actually sent. The question reads to the extent that, recently on the anniversary of August 5th, there have been numerous articles that have been published in the Houston Chronicle from the, he says, allegedly from the Pakistani diplomats posing as journalists, blah, 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 But, and what he says is he wants to ask you, this is Jason from Houston, whether there is a concerted effort being done to erase your side of the narrative, which the Kashmiri Hindu side of the narrative. Is that an effort, concerted effort from the Pakistani side or some other side or whichever side that wants to erase a narrative that is being construed by the Kashmiri Hindus? But what I want to ask you is, very recently, is what the more I read and listen and understand is where a narrative from the Kashmiri Hindu side is being put forward. So it's taken a long time for you all have to come together to coordinate, put your side of the narrative out here, and you're battling against the Washington Post and the New York Times and the rest of the world, as you have said. How do you, my question to you is, how are the Kashmiri Hindu groups, I'm sure the Kashmiri Hindu groups are not only resident in the United States, they are all over the world. I also want to point out as a personal disclaimer, my sister-in-law is also a Kashmiri Pandit. And there is a narrative inside at home too, which is not very far from what you're saying. But how do you groups all along the world coordinate? And when there is a concerted effort, if there is a concerted effort, would you agree that there is a concerted effort to change your side of the story? And how do you fight that story? And how do you coordinate? Give me 2 steps. Loaded question. You have 2 minutes to answer.
Yeah, definitely a loaded question and a lot of parts in this one question. So I want to address that one piece that you said, that we were silent for a long time. I want to tell you that it took a while for us to get back on our feet, and a lot of our community went through the transgenerational trauma where, you know, we were not in denial, but in denial of what happened. And we were focused on our families and you know, kind of creating a life for our kids. Talking about the efforts, back in 90s, social media, social platform, the connectivity was not as strong, or it may also be fair enough to say was really not there. We were not in an era where just at a click of a button, we could get people globally connected and have a common platform, one organization to fight this. What is being done now is based on the geographical location. There are a lot of activities happening at individual places, but we do have common platforms where we get together. We have Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora. We have overseas organizations where we have representatives from all of the world. We have representatives from, including primarily from India, and a lot of representation all over the world. One of the things that we recently did, there was a series of talks at the 1-year anniversary of abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, where the intent, again, just similar to today, is to get the knowledge, information out there and educate the people about what actually happened. So to answer your question of what's being done, a lot of collective and individual effort. I think just being here today on the panel and speaking that and representing my community is also an effort. That is something that we were lacking for a long time. We are not large in numbers, so from that perspective, maybe we don't make an impact, but we are truly trying to leverage the social platform, the individual strengths, and getting together and trying to get our voices out and get this false narrative out. Yes, there has forever been an effort by forces known to everybody to suffocate us, to stifle our voices, for our stories not to come out. And I think no more will we be silenced. We are coming together as a group, joining and getting our stories out there and fighting for it.
Thank you. Actually, I do want to stretch this question to, because broadly it also applies to other panels, because you all have your stories, but there are other community members who do not want to tell their stories and whom you could become the voice. Because I think the first step in recognizing any abuse is acknowledging there was an abuse meted out to you. And as you said, it's probably taken you 30 years to come to terms with that. This was abuse, this was not right, this was unjust. And you know, you're like, from the shock, you're recovering from the shock. And all your communities at some stage have a very shared path towards coming to this point. Now, when you all have come to this point, how do you fight? The first is, how do you coordinate and how do you put up this fight? How do you coordinate such a fight? And how do you get your version of the story out, right? And these are platforms that you're getting it. But I do want to ask from Mr. Mirza to Dawood to Mr. Thompson to Ms. Joe, not necessarily in that order. I'll invite you to the stage, but let me ask Mirza first. What efforts are you undertaking to coordinate these with your own communities all around the world?
Thank you for the question. Currently, we are in touch with our Yezidi from Russia, from Armenia, from Georgia, from Europe, from Iraq, and we are trying to get together to have a stronger effort to work with the Iraqi government and with the international community to achieve our goal. As today we have UN and human rights, the the five permanent member of the UN, which is US, France, UK, Russia, and China, who put together the international law. And we want that international law to apply to the Yazidi as well as to all other indigenous people. On the paper, it says that everybody is equal, but practically we are not equal. We are being used and abused. When the ISIS attacked us in 2014, in October of 2014, in Syria, tons of high-tech weapon and ammunition were dropped for ISIS by mistake. And here we tried so hard, contacting the US government, the UN, the Iraqi government, just screaming for some weapon so that our people could fight back. But unfortunately, no one even tried to help us out with some weapons so that our people could fight back. In fact, Germany gave some weapon to KRG, and in 2017, our people were killed by the German-made weapon.
And I understand. Could you keep it to the topic of the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are getting together. We are trying to have like a Yazidi like international federation to work all together. It's from all Yazidi around the world, and to work with the indigenous community and to work with other governments to achieve our goal, our land, our native land. If we lose our land, then our identity would be lost. During Saddam, the Yazidi were forced to accept the Arab identity. And when the KRG took power, the Yazidi have been forced to accept the Kurdish identity, which we are not belong to either identity. We are the indigenous people. The history of the Yazidi goes up to like 7,000 years now. So we are trying our thing to go what the international law is for everybody. And we want to ask the international community for that law to be applied equally to all indigenous people on the planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saleh Dawood?
Thank you. I just want to mention at the beginning that the communities, like especially like Yezidis, who are like a small population in the worldwide. It's like less than 1 million, and it's also the majority in one of the countries that is dominated by the Islamic State, and they don't have the big rule in the political and not even in the social life in the countries like Iraq. And at the same time, the majority of the Yezidis people went through a genocide just recently, like just 6 years ago, they fled the genocide, and the majority of them ended up in the camps. So this had a big impact on the Yezidis to not have a huge impact in the international community, the social media, and even you cannot see a lot about Yezidis in other medias. Like we don't hear different, like I am here in the United States, but I haven't heard so much about the Yezidis in the last 6 years. Even the genocide happened, and the whole world was witnessing what happened to the Yazidi people. So now as a Yazidi community, and as Ms. Rina mentioned, that we as a small community, we are trying to rebuild ourselves. Like talking about myself, after I immigrated to the United States, it took me like 4 years to grant asylum. And also I left my whole family behind, living in the camps. So now as an individual of the Yazidi community, we are trying with all the forces, try to rebuild and become the voice for our people who are left behind in the Iraq, and they're in dangerous and ongoing genocides is currently happening against them. And at the same time, we have different groups, different organizations like Yezda, like Nadia Murad, who is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and who is like also goodwill ambassador for the UN. She is trying her best to use her power to bring the awareness. As a Yazidi community, we want to share with other communities, with other indigenous communities who face the similar consequences. And I think we all share this some similarity, that we have been other groups are trying to wipe us out from the face of the earth. They are trying to erase our beautiful culture, our civilization. And we as a Yazidi work together in individual, and at the same time we are ready to work with different groups who are also in a similar situation in order to be a strong voice. And thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Overton? Yeah.
I think that I echo what everybody is saying about refusing to be silent and rising up. And for the Native Americans, currently, we've had a lot of attention brought to the social injustices because of COVID. People are saying all over the world, why are the Native Americans dying? And then they begin to find out that it's 150 years of oppression that is killing us now. And we also, by teaching our children, both traditionally and encouraging them to get an education so that they can keep the culture, yet be able to function in a society that doesn't particularly like Native Americans rising. Right now we have 4 people within Congress that are serving that are Native American. 2 of them are women. So we definitely see that rising and that support. And with what we're doing, I work with an intertribal group that is bringing COVID relief to many different tribes. And I couldn't be more honored to work with such an amazing team and to be able to do good things. And as they've said, mentioning it, saying, I heard this story. Did you know about the Kashmiri Hindu? Do you know about all these groups? And when we begin to share those and people know and see a face and connect it, that's where the power happens. That's where the passion is.
Thank you, Ms. Overton. Mr. Thompson? Yeah.
I'm a member of what's called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The United States is a very large country. I think sometimes, a lot of people that come from different countries, they don't understand how large this country is. California by itself would be the 6th largest economy in the world. So we're a very large country, and we've got people spread out in different areas and different cultures. So we have the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is the NAACP. NAACP works with other organizations like the Urban League. They work with the Native American Rights Fund. They work with various groups. It was formed by individuals that are not all Black. It was formed by people of Jewish background and other areas. So we try to work with, we're seeing a lot more also, if you saw from what's been going on with the George Floyd situation, people rose up of the African diaspora, what you call, have risen up all over Europe, all over the world. So we're trying to connect with a lot of those people and be sure that we are there. I think one of the problems with this whole process is that a lot of people have a tendency to say my situation is more tragic than yours. Your situation is more tragic than ours. Yours happened a long time ago. Mine's happening now. Blah blah blah. I think we all need to work together and try to have empathy for everybody's plight, and try to work for basic human rights and existence for everybody in the world. We got too many people that are poor and don't have voices that are being attacked on all fronts throughout the world, and we have a tendency to just go about our day and not pay attention to what's going on. I tell a lot of people, the one thing the military did for me is allow me to go around the world and see the abject poverty and horrible situations in some of the countries around the world. And we as Americans, a lot of times say, oh, we got it bad. Well, in a lot of ways we don't. So I hope that we can work with, move forward and work with people and be sure that we understand, their plights, but they also need to understand what went down in this country. that it's not all milk and honey and goodness. It's a lot of bad things occurred in this country, but we've been able to rise from it, and we can rise from it throughout the world. So good luck to everybody. I hope to work with everybody on their issues.
Thank you. Those are perfect closing words for this panel. There are tons of more questions, and those questions are singularly aimed at each of the panelists. With the permission of the organizers, and I leave that to the organizers and the panelists and the questioners to actually coordinate those individual questions to you. But what I heard today was a commonality. At least I think there is lots of commonalities between all your stories. All you are on the same panel today. That's a common stage, and all of you are in the United States. So perhaps this is a great platform for you five, if appropriate, to join hands and putting a common narrative of this together and going forward and working together on this particular issue. I'd like to once again thank the organizers, their partners, for this wonderful panel. And I would also welcome all the participants to give you a big round of virtual applause at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
It's over to the organizers from me. Thank you.